Dear friend,
let's discover more of who we are together.
Love, Haley and Amanda. Hi, dear friends.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We're so excited about our interview today. We have a woman of many accolades, but also just a vivacious spirit.
We heard about her. She's a neighborhood treasure where we live. We heard about her through our friend Cindy, who was like, you girls have got to meet this woman. She's so incredible. She's had amazing accomplishments, but also just her perspective on life is really beautiful. And so we went and had lunch with her a couple weeks ago, and we're just like blown away by her life experiences. And there's just something about the wisdom of an older person who has really been through a lot of things in life that will give you great perspective.
Yeah, she doesn't mind us sharing that she is 88 and she just still had an art show last year.
In May.
Yeah. So someone that still just has such a vivacious, curious spirit, but her story, you guys, you're just not going to believe it. She dives into some super interesting details, where she was born, how she's moved around the world.
And she's 100% by nature a creator. She she's going to get into her story and the interview, but some really interesting things was like she was a toy designer for Possum Trot, which was this company that she would travel all over the United States for like toy sales.
They would sell these toys in like Neiman Marcus and like.
So she's a creator, but then she's also an artist and sculptor, and
she's had shows in like the most famous gallery was called Cordier Ekstrom, and it's on Madison Avenue, and it showed people like Marcel Duchamp and stuff like these
which I don't know who that is, but Haley throws up about it. She can't believe it.
So prestigious. It's such a big deal, and she did it for these sculptures, but she has done so much stuff.
Her art is incredible. She also was a stage designer. So for the New York Theater Ballet, she did all of these sets that she gets into in the interview. She's accomplished amazing things, but her spirit and her attitude are really even more astounding than her accomplishments. So we were really excited to get her on the podcast and share her with you today. And we hope you enjoy it. Today we have Gillian Bradshaw-Smith, and we hope you love her. How are you doing today?
Excellent, thank you. Looking forward to you guys.
You look beautiful.
Thank you.
You know, it was our dear friend Cindy McCord that was singing your praises to us, which is why we've had the pleasure of even meeting and knowing you.
That was so sweet of her to introduce us.
But I do have to say, whenever someone mentions your list of accomplishments, it's pretty awe-striking and made us go, we've got to meet this woman.
We usually ask the people that we interviewed to give us a short overview of their story, but I know that yours is so interesting at every point and every turn that I don't know how you're going to tell it to us in a nutshell.
Well, I can must say I've really enjoyed my life up to date.
Oh.
And it started off in India when I was born to a military family, and of course, a part of the Raj when British were in charge of India. So playing with mud pies and hearing about my uncle's elephant, where my mother and father went on their honeymoon shooting tigers in the jungle, which
Oh
is
my
too
gosh.
horrible to think about. We
It
did
is.
have that. We did have that tiger on our floor with his mouth open, like
Oh my goodness.
the rug, you know, the tiger rug that they.
So
uh,
this was at like the foothills of the Himalayas,
well,
correct?
well, that was where I was born. Yes,
Okay.
the foothills of the Himalayas. I'm not sure which jungle they went shooting in when they were um, newlyweds, but
What did
yeah,
you think about growing up in that atmosphere? Was it beautiful? Did you know how beautiful it was then?
well, you know, when you're a child, you don't know anything else, so you don't really know that it's unusual compared to other English children. You know, it's just where you are. So we used to like my first memories are, I guess, when I was around 4, in what was well, and it still is the Indian Army headquarters in a place called Pune. And so we had a bungalow there, and we would sometimes sleep out when it was very hot under the stars, and but we'd have canopies like mosquito nets over the bed, so they were like shrouded. And my brother and I'd crawl up and down, growling like lions, and and we just loved that.
Could you hear wild animals at night?
No, not really. I don't know. I don't remember really hearing, because it was in a town.
Mm.
It was a race course my mother liked, so we'd go to the races, and we all had horses. Like we had ponies. Anyway, so eventually my father was posted to the back to what's now Pakistan. That was before the partition, when British left India. There was a big fight, like between the north and India and what was Pakistan mostly, and so eventually they were separated into 2 different countries. And although it was all part of India when we were there, it was we would go up into the hills in the winter and in the summer to keep cool, because it was very hot in the plains, and we were even in a place where you could see Mount Everest.
Wow.
You went to a certain point, and
You must count that some sort of blessing as a child.
Oh yes, and then I remember, because by then I was probably about 7 or 8, and I remember, cycling to dancing classes and climbing over because our house there was next to the race course, and like climbing up into the judges' stand on the corner and watching the races from there, that kind of thing, as a kid. But then, then the war came, and my father actually was on he was a big man. He was like 6'4", and but he died of a heart attack just towards the beginning of the war.
No.
And so we were all shipped down to the very south of India.
And how old were you when you were?
I was 8 then, and it took 5 days in a train. That was quite an experience, I remember. And then eventually we arrived down in this beautiful area where they had like jungles, but kind of not really. It was called the shoulder. It was like you'd get up to a point and you'd look out, and it's as if you were looking at the ocean. All you could see was the tops of trees for as far as you could look to the horizon, just like this. And then you go into it through a path, and as the trees closed over your head, there would be this tremendous hush that would come, it would be like bracken under the trees, and it was quite beautiful and mysterious.
Hmm.
And there was tea plantations, and I would go to dancing classes, ballet, and there was the women. It was mostly women who'd been what were called war widows. Their husbands were in the war fighting somewhere, or real widows like my mother, who were kind of shuffled off to this like way water, but very beautiful, to kind of wait until they could get passages back to England, which eventually we did. And then we got back to England, but we were in a convoy the second convoy to go through the Suez Canal.
Wow.
Because the fighting in North Africa the Germans had been beaten, and the Suez Canal was opened again. So we were able to, took us a month to get through that passage, and then we, my mother got sick on the ship. So she was in the ship's hospital for the most of the voyage. My brother and I had free rein to run around and play and do whatever we wanted. So it sounds like it was awful, but actually it was kind of fun.
A whole month on a ship.
It was a troop ship. It had been, I was just looking up online. It was converted from a passenger liner to a troop ship, and they cut out all the insides and made hammocks. And so when you went down into the belly of the ship, there were just rows and rows of hammocks.
Wow.
They were transporting troops back to England, and the convoy was spread around. You could see aircraft carriers and.
Did you meet anyone very interesting on the ship?
Not really. No, not that I just don't remember meeting anyone, except the young officer who was designated to return us to our aunt, take us once we reached, because we came into Glasgow around the north of Ireland. I'd never seen anything so green in my life as seeing the north of Ireland, the grass, because India is kind of more like deserty. And well, not everywhere, obviously, but that green was like astonishing to me.
I bet.
As a child. And so my mother had been taken off the ship in a stretcher and put on a little launch and taken off to the hospital. And so we were taken off the ship first, and this young officer took us by train to our aunt's house, and which was near Wales, in the English countryside, right in the countryside, in an old, like 16th century farmhouse with timber beams and stables. And
that sounds very dreamy.
Yeah, fields going down to the River Dee, which is featured in a big poem, famous poem about the.
And when you arrived there, you were about 9 years old.
11. Then I was 11.
And so just in these first 11 years of your life, all of this has happened.
Yeah, and a lot more I haven't told you about but yeah.
And
so it was pretty amazing, because you come back, England had been bombed horribly. But this was in 1944, when we sailed from Bombay on D-Day. So the invasion of Europe had happened and was going on at that time. And so I think the German bombing of London and the various cities, I think it was only occasionally, because they had by then the rocket bombs, or the V2s that were unmanned, but we didn't get any of that. because but we did get a lot of rationing, like 1 egg a week and quarter of a pound of butter for a week. Very sparse, but we were in the country, so we could get milk and eggs, but
Right.
but sugar was very scarce. Flour, it was difficult. But I was sent that September to boarding school and I had not really been to school in India. There was little schools organized by various mothers, but I'd only been to one professional school for about a year in that whole time. And boarding school, I was kind of a freak.
What made you a freak?
Well, it was partly because
The purple hair?
I wouldn't. Well, the purple hair, I acquired that later. Suddenly grew out purple. I was astonished. But yeah, it was the culture, like the children that were there. It was all girls, because in England, boys and girls are separated, and so just girls, and they thought I was Chinese for some reason. No.
That's
So and the thing that made it difficult was I was 2 years older because I was so behind in my studies that I was 2 years behind the other children. So I felt like this, although I wasn't a very large child, I felt like a lump, on a log.
Yeah.
But I know, it was hard to feel part of the kind of culture, but it
And
was.
how did that
Mhm.
how did that impact you? How did you react, and what did it make you grow into?
I think it made me very obedient, very good, like sort of a docile child, and trying to stay
Because
out
you
of the
wanted to
way.
fit in?
Yeah, well, I wanted to fit in, but I didn't want to kind of, although I did like performing. So the one thing about this school, it was, the school was quite tiny, and I think maybe there were, I don't know how many children, maybe 60 or, it was a very small girls' boarding school, in this very, like a mansion that would have been converted into a school. Full setting in the Welsh hills near a fairly famous Welsh town called Llantysilio. And they'd have like what were called eisteddfods there, which were ancient, going back to the sort of Welsh bards, where they'd have a big gathering and the Welsh bards would quote, like, perform their poems and sing, and the Welsh love to sing. So these gatherings were like a gigantic tent, a huge tent, and then there'd be choruses and recitations, and I would be doing elocution. I would recite poem, and other children from other, but it was like a big thing.
That seems very brave of you, if you were feeling like an outsider and wanting to, be obedient, and then you were this performer also.
Yeah, I also like to, so duality, I like to dance. And they would all, we'd have dance, a lot of dance. And they would even, for instance, they allowed me to choreograph a whole ballet that was performed. Wow. And they had a top orchestra come and
we'll get back to this, but
to Mozart, eine kleine Nachmusik. And so I certainly like to perform.
We can get back to that, but that could have been foreshadowing to something that happened later on, huh?
Right, because I had to choose between art and dance when it came to a career, or what I wanted to do when I went to university, or and I got a position at one of the London theatre schools, and I got a position at Reading University, which is not too far from London, their art department. So I had to choose between theatre arts or fine art, because I always loved making things as a child. I think artists always start as, they're always making things as children.
So before we go on with your story, you know how we were talking with you about how we really do think it's important for every person to feel like an outsider at some point in their life, because it's really good perspective. Do you feel like now, when you're reflecting back, that having that experience as feeling outside of maybe the out of place in that girls' school was a good thing for you?
Oh yes, I think so. I mean, the thing is that one really can't regret. One's life is one's life. You can't really regret the things that happen to you, because they are what inform you may in a moment while you're living it, feel like, hell, I just don't want to be here or what have you. But and obviously there are some things one does regret, but for the most part, it's your life, and you have to build on it, and it gives you perspective. It gives you a unique vision of the world. So I mean, I was just thinking how fortunate we are to be conscious, like this bundle of molecules that somehow is conscious, and it is like life is like an astonishingly amazing thing, and the fact that we happen to be humans and can contemplate it as well as live it is something to be treasured. That's my old age wisdom.
I loved it.
I'm gonna listen to that on repeat. So tell us, what did you pick? Did you pick Reading, the art and?
Yes, I picked Reading. It was actually, and I think it was a wise choice for me, because I didn't really have the body of a dancer. A little too short, a little too square, not long legs, short little legs, and
you said that you were always making stuff as a kid.
Yeah.
What was like the first thing you remember making as a kid?
I think I remember making with my brother. We would make. One of the places we lived, there was a bank near the driveway, and it was sort of mud, and we'd turn it into a village by building up roadways and building little houses and using sticks for the rafters and piling mud on top, like little adobe. It was like a little adobe village.
Yeah.
And we'd make things together. I remember we also made a village out of cardboard and paper and stuff. And then I would make my doll's clothes.
So you were just always drawn to making.
Making, yes. I like making things with my hands.
I'm wondering too if, because consider your childhood so like free and being outdoors, and it's really like space for your mind to wander and imagine, and we talk about how we would like to raise our kids, not our kids, but our separate kids, and that we feel like we want to somehow give them and I know you were presented with a lot of challenges too, but give them space for their minds to really wander.
Because we were in, we could go wander off, even in England, and because there, when I first came back, I lived with my cousins and some friends. There were 6 kids altogether. I was the eldest, I think. Yeah. And then there were 2 of my cousins and then 2 friends of theirs. And so there were 3 women and their 6 kids. We would go off for a day, wander around the countryside, just we'd pick mushrooms and then in India too, we wouldn't really wander too far, but in one place we could wander and go up onto what was called Plum Pudding Hill, and we'd make what we called flying dragons. We'd get a stone, sew it into a cloth pouch, make a tail with like kite tail tags on it, and then you go up to the top of the hill and you'd whirl it around your head and let it go, and it'd go shh. Of course, it might hit somebody on the head, which wouldn't be too
It looked like you just did a magic trick and a cat appeared.
But yeah, she likes to come and join me and step on my keyboard and mess up my, yeah, that's Posy. Found her up in a tree when she was 5 inches long.
My goodness.
Anyway, yeah, so I loved art at school. They would let me do, they'd even let me cut classes and do art, go and paint a painting somewhere. So when I got to university, that was my best time, because there I did fit in. I had got friends. I wasn't like this odd thing.
You found your people.
I found my people, and it was great. So that was a 6-year course. I did a year extra, which was a teaching diploma. So I'd have at least a profession, because being an artist is one thing, but anyway, so I could have teaching creds.
When you graduated university, what did you do for work?
I taught art at
Okay.
a girls' school, but this was a state school rather than a private school.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did. I did enjoy it. It wasn't what I actually. I mean, I enjoyed it. Of course, there were always difficult moments with kids,
Mm-hmm.
but the kids mostly liked their art, doing art. So, I was not trying to force algebra down their little throats.
So how old were you when you came to America?
I came to America when I was 30 years old. I had just gotten this invitation from my uncle, who lived in Dallas with his wife, my aunt, and they invited me to come for a year. And so I quit the teaching, and I had to wait 6 months to get my visa from the American embassy and go through all that, my green card, so I could teach, so I could get a job here if I needed, And then I came, and it was like I flew. It was in January. It was like a snowy day in London, and I flew to America, which I hadn't really thought about that much before. And it was amazing, because when you were over the British Isles, the villages and towns look like squirrely, but when you fly over America, all the villages towns are like grid format. So I flew into Chicago. I was astonished to see a policeman with a gun on his hip. Like,
Hello.
in England, police don't carry weapons. And so then I flew, caught another plane, flew to Dallas, and it was January. So, and my aunt and uncle, they were going to be moving shortly to Memphis. And so I was going to be on my own. They introduced me to some friends, and so I got my start. And I had a little garage apartment with Turtle Creek right at the foot of the
Wow.
lawn. It was really nice. The building is now torn down. It was a family that lived in this two or 3 story wood building, just like, the 3-story buildings on Winnetka. And
And when you arrived here, did you feel like that outsider again, or did you feel excited to explore this new world and kind of be on your own for the first time?
I felt excited to be on my own for the first time. My aunt and uncle went off to look for houses in Memphis because he had this new job as the CEO of a cotton insurance company. And I got to know some, I painted, I got to know a few people. I'd paint murals, I'd paint portrait. I painted a portrait of Ebby Halliday, who was a very famous realtor now, then she was, I guess she was a realtor then, but she wasn't as famous as she became. And then, and I'd make wall hangings, and I'd teach embroidery to the ladies of Dallas.
That's so cool.
And then I worked in one of the art galleries, assisting in the frame shop, and that was great because I got to see, meet some of the artists and other folk in that. Murray Smither, who ran that gallery for the owner, and then I became like girlfriend to the guy who was the framer, and he went to New York, and so we got married in New York, and then I moved to New York, and that was like an astonishing change, because I had always envisioned New York as being pristine, very clean, and there it was the grimiest at that time. I mean, I think it's cleaned up. Eventually I lived there about 28 years in that, and but it was a bit of that was a bit of a change, but it was great. It was right in the so that was in 67.
And you did some incredible things.
7. So, and eventually I got a wonderful art gallery. I was doing these big sculptures and things, and it was, I love New York. I mean, it was great. I mostly stayed in Manhattan. Of course, New York has 5 boroughs, but Manhattan is kind of hot.
What was inspiring your art then?
Well, it wasn't really anything. It was more internal. It was sort of, I had kind of moved from doing this stitchery, the sewing, the wall hangings, and now they were becoming 3-dimensional. So they were becoming like these elephantine creatures. I'll show you. I have a picture here.
Oh, great.
You can see it, but
oh my goodness.
See,
What is that made out of?
this is made out of canvas. Like you'd make a painting, you know, a raw canvas, natural color of linen. And then I would make an inner structure and then sew it and then stuff it and draw on it with black ink to create so they're almost like elephant-like creatures. So
Does
I
it
did
have anything to do with being from India?
I knocked out, here's another one.
Love it.
This one is sort of like striding legs, and some of these were, this one was exhibited in Geneva at a gallery, at one of the museums there. They were having a show on soft sculpture. So in this period, soft sculpture was just kind of coming into, because nobody really had done soft sculpture before. This is another piece, which is a small piece with a painting in the background, a little box, and then these kind of a repetition of these forms painted on. Anyway,
so interesting.
So I had that first show at a pretty well-known art gallery. I was very lucky. Called Cordier Ekstrom, and that show, I was interviewed by the New York Times. I think I can send you a link to that.
I was about to quote something from there, but go ahead.
No, I'm not going to quote anything, but I just was saying that they happened to publish that article on my birthday, May 1st, which was such a, and then I got some, from that, I got requests to do books. I mean, it's amazing. And so I did do a book on stuffed animals, on how to make, because I had made a pig.
Tell us about this pig.
My famous pig. Yes. Well, I had been working on a sculpture which had sort of like breast-like forms on it. And I was using snap fasteners for the nipples, because they have a little nipple-like. And then I made these like fabric tubes, stuffed tubes that would snap on, kind of like snakes. I called it Cleopatra. And that, having worked on that, I just had this vision when soaking in the tub one day of a pig, a mother pig toy with baby piglets snapped on to the nipples. And so I was so inspired. I found an old scrap of felt, pink red felt, and I made this pig with a mummy pig with her babies. And my husband Bud then had some contacts, and he took a pig down to show them, and they were so thrilled with my pig that they put me in touch with this guy who was looking for an idea. He was part of a government contract to create work in Appalachia. And this, I'm now talking about I guess I did that it's kind of late 60s, 69 or so. And so I was sent down to McKee in Kentucky, and they had rustled up 5 women and rented a room, and rented a little old house in Jackson, in McKee, and I had sorry, I had meanwhile designed a collection of toys for this trip, maybe about 8 toys, other toys. And so I went down to teach these ladies how to, I'd broken the process down into segments so they could be done in a production. And so that's what happened. They started, and then there was a wonderful woman called Jenny Hammonds, and she was to do the marketing, and we would go around. They would make the toys. We would go around to the gift shows in LA, in Boston, Atlanta, and Dallas, and San Francisco, which was great fun, and man the booth, and the toys would be shown, and then they would be sold into the gift shops. And like Neiman Marcus bought a pig
What a
boat.
cool experience.
And yeah, it was like, because I really had no kind of, it taught me a lot about, how you run, business, a company. I didn't do any of that part of it. But it was funded by Jobstart, which had been started by Lyndon Johnson to create employment in Appalachia, and where it was really, and the women were like, they were really, the houses there sometimes were just made out of like Coca-Cola crates.
Leslie Freeman, FaceTime video.
That's my friend calling. Sorry, I'm doing my podcast.
Oh, sorry, goodbye.
She and I are working on a book. She writes. She's an author, and I'm kind of work with her on. We've been working on these books of hers, wonderful books. And
you're still doing stuff. You're still inspired to do art.
I had a show just in May earlier this year at the art gallery I'm lucky enough to have in Dallas called Row 2 Art. And so, I'm very lucky because I do like still make art.
Mm-hmm.
And
will you tell everyone about how you got into stage design in New York, though?
Oh yes, that was another thing.
I think this is really cool that they still use it.
Yeah, they do. It's just like I had this fine art gallery in New York, and run by an absolutely the most elegant man I've ever known, called Cordier Ekstrom. He was a tall, slender Norwegian, and his wife, Carmina Miguel, was like a South American heiress, and they lived in Paris. And the art gallery was actually started in Paris, and anyway, so she was a historian of the ballet, and one day she invited me to tea at their house because she, we got along well, and she introduced me to a woman called Diana Bayer, who was the artistic director of a ballet company called New York Theater Ballet, and it was a chamber company, which meant it wasn't, they had like a small group of dancers, maybe 10, and they would do small ballets, ballets that sometimes revivals of ballets that had been, and they recreated them, and original work. And so I was asked to paint a backdrop for a ballet to an Edgar Allan Poe poem, and I had never done that before, but it wasn't huge by backdrop standards, but it was still about 30 feet, maybe 20 feet or so by 12 feet. And it was of a harbor scene. And it was designed by and Palmina Miguel, my art dealer's wife, had the original design for that ballet. And she had many original designs for Ballet Russe, a lot of very famous ballets and designs of facets, costumes, etc. And so that production, she had kind of instigated it in a way. She had the original music. Anyway, so that's what got me started. So this ballet, I did that. And then they invited me to design an original set for their Cinderella. And so I did that.
That's so cool.
And that had consisted of moving parts. It would be, they also did a lot of touring as a company, toured the United States. And so everything had to fit in a truck. So the dimensions of the truck were the first thing you had to know. So you could build pieces that would break up and fit in. And anyway, so that was very successful. And Cinderella was a beautiful ballet. And then the director of another ballet company or member of the board saw it and then called me and invited me to do the designs for their next ballet, which was Romeo and Juliet. And so then I did that, and then I did a Macbeth, and then I did Nutcrackers for many Nutcrackers for different, and so on until in the end I did about 20 odd productions.
Did you enjoy set design?
Oh yes, I loved that. I really loved that.
It kind of
make a model, you'd make a model, and then you'd and I found a couple. There were a couple of guys who had started. In fact, I went to the very first classes. They started a scenic painting course in Jersey City, which was I was living in Hoboken then, which is right across from Manhattan, like one stop on the subway. And so I went to there and I learned a lot about scenic painting, how to paint, on that scale. And that was great fun. And then doing the sets, and sometimes I would even fly. In fact, the New York Theater Ballet did a set in El Paso. No, not El Paso. Anyway, in Texas, and it was like 3 new ballets that I did the sets for, and so I got to go to the openings of those because it happened to be in Texas, and and I would go to the openings in New York, of course, and that was like another whole career, and then that led to painting backdrops for photographers, and then doing more murals here in Dallas, mostly interior murals. I only ever did one outside mural in Oak Cliff, which got painted over the other day.
I hate that.
Oh God!
But it was such an amazing coincidence because I just happened to be driving by with a couple of my artistic art friends, known as the Bryans, Brian Scott and Brian Jones, and we were driving. It was on 7th Avenue. There were a number of murals that had painted there. Quite a while back, mostly to stop graffiti from being painted on these buildings. And I had done this wonderful scene with black and white, supposedly painted black and white, not black and white, blue and white tile, Portuguese style decoration. And then on the garage door, I had a gigantic bull and then some vaqueros on horseback on either side on the walls. And it was sort of in a Spanish style to kind of, because I thought a lot of the Hispanics in the neighborhood. And so when I got there, they were painting the whole building black. They were painting up,
It's
right?
a pity.
Anyway, it had faded a lot, meanwhile, you know, in the sun over the years. But, but you know, Haley knows, like, you know, it comes and goes. You have to kind of, once it's out of your hands, you know, you have to say bye.
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 So with your art now, what is inspiring you these days? Like how has your art transformed into what you're doing now?
Well, what I don't know, it kind of evolves. It always has a sort of similar feel to it. I've always enjoyed using, I guess from when I was a kid, colored pencils. I know it sounds like a very like childish, but you see I have like lots of colored pencils. But I did a series that were my last, well, I did a series of paintings several years ago. These were paintings of the crepe myrtle trees, which are have very beautiful smooth trunks, and they have very explicitly sexual parts to them, like the way there might be I mean, literally, you can see them. It looks like a breast with a nipple, or if I can dare say the word, a cock, or a vagina, and limbs. And so I thought, you know, they always fascinated me, these trees with their bark that's almost like skin, and these wonderful forms, you know, mostly the trunks. You know, and so I photographed a bunch of them, mostly in the fall after the leaves had dropped. So they were just sculptural forms. And I turned those paintings into those photos into a series. I mean, I did a series of paintings from those photographs.
Yeah.
And and I've always enjoyed things like the Greek myths. Well, there's a myth about a nymph called Daphne, who was a wood nymph, and she was spotted by Apollo, who is the sun god, who wanted to ravish her, and she didn't want to be ravished, so she pled to Zeus, the chief god, to save her, and he turned her into a tree. And so, and there are there are lots of classical paintings from the Renaissance of Daphne being turned into a tree. Sometimes she has leaves on the end of her fingers. Anyway, so I called this series of paintings Finding Daphne, because I was looking for the female form and also I found some Apollos too in the form of these trees. And then so the next series, I did a series that were more like caves, and I had been to the caverns in New Mexico. What are those caverns called? Carlsbad Caverns.
Yeah.
You walk underground, and they have amazing stalactites. So anyway, then I did a series, but this time instead of being flat, this time I used mostly crayon and black paper, and I'd cut out parts. So the painting, they wouldn't be paintings, these works. They weren't, you know, would be layered. And it was, and they had moons in them, like sometimes many moons. So they were like landscapes from planets, from another part of the universe.
Those sound to me like
so very kind of poetic, mysterious. And then the next lot I did were a series called The Storms of Jupiter, because I'd seen some pictures of some of the NASA probes of Jupiter with these like whirling storms. And so then again, I used cut out and this time they were more dimensional, and I'd twist the paper and draw all over, color it and make these pieces that were kind of abstract. But I had moon. I also had other planets in them sometimes, like moons floating around, and I really enjoyed doing those. So now I'm in the midst of wondering what I'm going to do next.
Wandering and
That's like,
wondering.
oh my goodness, I have no idea what I'm going to do next.
I love that, though, that you are still so just curious and inspired, and you don't have all the answers, but you're excited for even the unknown.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and I would say that you said at the beginning that you've loved your life to this point. We talk a lot, or we have an episode about success, and that it isn't always defined correctly. For people that think that you've had a successful life so far, how would you define success, and do you agree?
Well, I mean, some people would define success totally in terms of how much money they make,
Right.
like amassing billions, and good luck to them, but I think, to me, I feel like it's almost a word I don't like, success, because it sort of means that that the opposite is failing. Well, I've been very fortunate in that my life has not been, I haven't had to flee and be a refugee, or one has to be terribly grateful to be sort of a middle class living in the West, and not like facing such tremendous odds of just mere survival that you can't be having a life that allows you to express. I mean, one can't help but just be like immensely grateful for that. And that, I mean, I just love the older I get, the happier I get. I found that, life was much more stressful for me earlier, when I was thinking I should be this or I should be that, like, and of course, but once all those sort of worries about love and marriage and kind of, or the pressure that sometimes that can be put on one, from the family, oh, you're 30, you're made to feel like an old maid,
if you're not
right
married.
up old spinster, So, once all that's out of the way, you can just relax. And of course, it's just so wonderful to, so to speak, consume art that other people have created, like, I mean, visual arts, music, theater, ballet, reading books, watching. I mean, humans are just, and to me, it's all comes down to play. Basically, I think that sparks in children. And I think if people can give children as much opportunity to try different things and have different experiences and go, on adventures, show them, go on trips to see. I mean, I remember going down a coal mine. We were taken down a coal mine in Wales, That was like astonishing to me, because I'd never, and they'd switch out, you had headlamps, they'd switch out the lights, and there was blackness, and literally, you say, oh, I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. the darkness was like a almost like a palpable thing, and you literally could not see anything in front of your face, and it was like, and going down in that so fast that when it slowed up, you thought you were going up again, because
Oh my gosh.
just slowing up gave you the sensation of rising. That was like quite an experience.
Wow.
And so I think I think childhood is very important, obviously, and I think if lucky children get to experience a lot and are able to play and find out what it is their passions are, and some never have that chance.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I personally, I think, like, as a community, as a country, we should be like spending our money on the children, educating, giving them experiences.
I love how open you are to the world around you. It's really beautiful.
Thank you. Well, I'm lucky to be alive and experiencing it. Life is precious.
Yes,
I mean,
We're
it's
so glad
shame that it is.
we're so glad our paths crossed too, because you're an inspiration, just the way you live your life, not necessarily the accomplishments you've made in your life, even though they're astounding, but your perspective is very beautiful. And that's why we wanted to have you on the podcast.
Well, I appreciate it. I really loved it. And I loved meeting you two, who I consider like astonishingly accomplished women. Just like, wow.
That's very kind.
So wonderful. Thank you. I hope we stay in touch.
We
Of course
will.
we will.
And we're going to share all kinds of things about you on the internet. So get ready. Thank you, Gillian.
Yeah, thanks for making time for
Thank
us
you.
today.
Lovely.
I love her.
I love her too. And it makes me want to keep just being playful and open and exploring stuff and kind of taking that pressure off that we've talked about in other episodes too. She's doing it.
Yeah. So we hope you really loved her. You can find her work today. She is in a gallery even today.
She's in a gallery here in Dallas called Row 2, but there is a huge online art website called Artsy. So if you get on Artsy and search her, Gillian Bradshaw-Smith, which will include all the information, you can also find her and her work there.
So we really hope this was a great episode for you. Make sure you're following us on Instagram at dearfriend.podcast so that you can see the content we share about her this week. And also, if you're watching us on YouTube, hi, thank you. Please give us this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. And we'll be back next week with another great episode. So thank you guys for tuning in.
Hope this conversation sends you out with your new aligned mission and energy.
Until next time.
Live purdy.
Live purdy.